Please note that you're about to commence recording this meeting. Your video and audio will be recorded and live streaming from now onwards, and the video will be available on YouTube after the meeting has finished. The meeting starts recording. Thank you, members, councillors. Welcome to the gallery. I'll read the Civic Prayer. Almighty God, help us to duly and faithfully carry out our numerous duties to the best of our judgment and ability for the advancement of this district and the benefit of all whom we are here to serve. And the Coorong District Council acknowledges the traditional owners of the land on which we meet. Apologies, we have one councillor Yanks an apology. Here, acknowledgements. We start with Neil, councillors on page C12. There is an error. It should be the CEO to describe exactly where this error is.
So C12 in the confidential section, there's the date of 2020. About the middle of the page, it should be 2019.
Item number 2, confirmation of the ordinary meeting held on the 18th of August. Councillor Lewis. Councillor Land and Roundtree. Discussion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. I'll have someone move a special meeting held on the 1st of September, please. Councillors Taylor and Roundtree. No discussion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously again. Adjourned business. We have no adjourned business. Minute action list, item 4. Any questions regarding the minute action list, Councillor Roundtree?
Minute number 17020 regarding the tagline floating theatre. Should that not be marked as a work in progress because funding hasn't yet been found and feasibility hasn't been complete rather than making it complete?
We can make it complete and just have it on our scope of works to do, or it may be on the books for over 12 months, depending on when funding actually becomes available. So I have no preference now which way you want to do that.
So this is my benefit. When they go on to the complete list, we will always see that complete list. This is that you don't look there to see what's still coming into upper and ask questions about it. Personally, if it's still in progress, I prefer to see it still written as work in progress and complete. That's just my point of view. Others might feel differently. And also that the completed section and responsible officer seems to be blocked. The headings don't match the colour.
We'll check that.
I have to agree with Councillor Roundtree, sometimes particularly when they're long out, even if it's a 3-monthly report about where some of those actions are, as against doing this report, but at least so that we're up to date with some of those projects ahead.
Thank you. Any other questions around the minute action list?
Mr. Mayor, 188.20 we've got down here as complete. Complete asset management. I suggest we haven't even received it yet, so how can we complete it? Unless we refer to the infrastructure and access committee. But that one in the law, it should be left on there. Page further then.
That has been referred to the meeting.
The next infrastructure, that was, sorry, for you, Mayor. It came to our council meeting and there was a request that went through the infrastructure and at the committee, so that plan had come to council. It's now going back to committee.
Well, we have to send it in, right?
When we have our next committee meeting, Mr. Chair, you will deal with it.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. We're only an advisory committee. So we've just got to make, this is one of the things that you got to make sure that these things do go on for that.
Keep coming back.
Yeah. Okay.
I understand we were happy with the report in general and go back to the slides, come back to the
Yeah. Correct, yes.
And it's just one other thing. 19, which is the major plant being council provided, hourly, updated hourly rates for major plant, and actually hourly rates, this budget is for grade just graded. This information will be behind by no later than months to 2020. We've got a very, very small cost section which didn't mean anything the other day of $56 an hour. The idea was to compare the budgeted hours we used for our grader against the actual hours used on a grader didn't, but that has not been forthcoming.
I'll follow that up and check. I don't know if that's possible, but I'll.
Well, it could be, because according to, we've told them our asset management plan and road asset management plan, we've got all those details. We know what we've put for, and that's the only details we've provided. We paid $280 for it, and so $80 or something. So you've got your costs, your write-off costs, your depreciation costs, and your actual running costs. So it gives us a figure of actually what a grader has cost to run for that. We're not an estimate.
You have to follow
Okay, councillors, councillor Taylor.
Back to 186.20. I think, yeah, it's, it indicates there was still on INA committee, motion without notice. How do councillors who are not on that committee get information before that committee?
So my understanding is all agenda items, all the agendas of council committees would be available to all councillors, and councillors are more than welcome to attend. They would just be non-voting and non-commenting in most places, in most scenarios, attendees of the meeting. I would understand the chair's discretion. He would give he or she, as councillor Bland, the chair of the committee, would give some discretion. The minutes come to this meeting, but I would have thought the minutes go to all councillors of the two, finance and INA.
Give it a bit further now, because it says here, in further sealing of unsealed roads well into next. Surely that's any unsealed roads in the marina development. Because there are other unsealed roads in Wellington East, one of which is Placidus, the end of Placidus Dates Road, which was on a list that did appear, but then it disappeared off the list. Now, I assume that is as a result of the INA committee taking it off, but I don't know that for sure. Due to the high volumes of traffic running down, I mean, last year or earlier this year, the Director of Infrastructure authorised a fantastic sort of rebuild of that section of unsealed road because of the heavy trucks taking the corner out. And the unsealed is in fantastic condition. Now we're in a season where the farmer up there is running his crop to obviously his markets and ports. I can see that it's going to deteriorate, back to its original state. So it's a concern to me, it hasn't bothered me about it, but it's a concern to me that what should have been sort of a cost in 1 year and wouldn't need to be a cost in future years, maybe another cost coming up because it's been removed from the list.
Hasn't been removed. The minute says things are deferred and upon an investigation of a piece that wasn't in the list.
I thought it was on the list because that's why I spotted
Well, the list was a previous minute. So there was a list, and I think you find that even the works last year didn't complete what would have been scheduled for last year. But we can take it on board with the committee because we need to proceed with the investigation around the Trilby Road missing piece.
I agree with that.
Investigation of that.
Sorry, man, but the Trilby Road is one bit, but I'm talking about the unsealed bit of Placidus Dates Road, which is not in the marina development. So I understand where the marina development, you wouldn't want to seal those roads because no one's building anything.
So you're talking about Placidus State Road. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Placidus Dates Road is half sealed.
Yes.
Up to Dunpiper, and then it's unsealed.
News to me, sorry. I'm looking, that we had that on the plan last year or any recent years.
Thank you.
Council
Just one other, Mr. Mayor, it's not recorded here, but I queried council's cash position last meeting, the CEO advised that current figures not on hand, particularly for the rate really perspective. So an update on cash balances will be provided to the September council meeting, but I can't see it in the agenda.
So it's actually in the draft financial statements that you have a copy of for this meeting.
No, doesn't give it at the present moment, does it?
And it's just 30th of June.
Okay.
Any other questions? Being done, I'll move on to item 5, questions with notice. Councillor Lang, you have a question there?
Thank you. Yeah, still doesn't answer quite my query. It's been brought to my attention, and I won't wish to get any dump manager in trouble. But cash is being required and no receipts being issued. On one occasion, with $100. So it raises the question of serious audit trail. And the fact that we can't offer credit card facilities out of these days, without enough to say, hang on, it's not fun.
That's when you mean. So that's a serious issue, and that, I suppose, connotation of nuance didn't come through with the question, Councillor. We have
Being delicate.
Sometimes delegate is not. If it's about a specific stuff, I'd rather we dealt with that not in a public arena. In terms of FPOS facilities, we are looking at whether it's financially viable to have them at each of our transfer stations.
Don't worry about it, it's not.
So there may be tail and bend, maybe if you look at the number of people who use tail and bend versus maybe the number of people who use Canalcum, you would think that maybe it's not because FPOS doesn't come free. So we are just looking at whether that is an option for us across the district.
Councillor Taylor.
Through you, Mayor. FPOS, you can bypass FPOS and go to the Square solution.
So how do we make any electronic solution? Squares, there are a whole heap of them on the market now. You can use your phone. We're just looking at what's the most sensible. When I use FPOS, sorry, generic term for electronic payment.
I think we need to review this policy around our waste stations. Just to tighten up, we are tightening up on, we're questioning the use of credit cards. I think we really need to tighten up on particular cash transactions at our waste stations. If there's no receipt being issued, could be $20. Thanks very much. In the box.
Okay, under recorded by someone, not sure. At the present
I'm with you, Councillor, in a second. Steve, do you want to add to this process?
So what there is, the staff members of the utility client actually record all the transactions that occurred and the value of the transaction. And then what we do is we actually cross-check and balance to make sure that the money's forward matched the receipt. That probably doesn't guarantee all transactions.
But if they don't, go back to their office and add it to the sheet, having taken $20 or $100.
Just Councillor, I just be stepping just carefully, please.
Yeah.
I think it's been raised and it's on the agenda, obviously, of the staff are aware of it. Councillor Hill is the next speaker.
I was just saying, they do issue a receipt on request, I always get a receipt.
I think, Councillor Langley, I think the question is valid. I think the answers are fine at this stage, if that's satisfactory. Okay. Question 5.2, questions without notice, councillors. Any questions without notice? Item 6 is petitions. There is nil. Item 7 deputations, which also we have none today. Excuse me. Item 7.1 is public question time. We've had 2 submitted which I'll read out the answers, the questions and the answers will be the best for anyone, please. Information document, Stephen Pape was the questioner. Information document lists seal patching undertaken for Pole Tallick Road under the Rural Roads Update. However, I don't believe this work has been done. Can you advise if it's been completed, and if not, when it will be done? And the answer is, some work was undertaken on this road doing seal patching with a jet patcher in August, and the guideposts were replaced recently. However, there is still additional seal patching work to be done on this road. Councillors are awaiting the availability of the jet patcher to undertake these works. Council estimate approximately 60% of the patching required has been undertaken to date. And the second question is, and this is with regard to council motions, Councillor Arthur's motion. Councillor Arthur's motion, with notice for mobile black spot funding, could the Narung Rauken area be added as a mobile black spot? This area has bad mobile reception, and the short answer is yes. Stephen's not here, so that's the answer. Thank you. There is no other time. Move on. Reports by members, councillors, my report is there. Councillor Ling.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The 3rd of September meeting with Dew, Natural Resources, National Parks. Can you elaborate on what that was in regard to?
Certainly, thank you for prompting.
Particularly for the Lakes Board members.
Mr. Pape, you missed your opportunity. You did really get the answers.
Okay.
So we now on to my report. Yes, so the CEO and myself met with the director in second IC of Department of Environment and Water, and that was principally around, I suppose, sort of the Salt Creek area and the services that are available or otherwise there, and secondly with the greater Coorong, as in more perhaps the northern end, like how we can work with them to come up with some better planning outcomes and some better, I suppose, development of tourism product in that area. I believe out of that meeting we come out with probably an hour and a half, not long we thought. We probably come out with at least an indicative commitment to dealing with a sort of a Salt Creek Carlton Bay facility, be the politest way I could word it, as sort of a separate line item, and secondly to work with them and with us with Dew and potentially did now will be. They were in this meeting around, I suppose, development potential of tourism product in the Coorong area. I might start to see the reasonable recollection of the meeting's results.
It was to me. There was probably two levels of the conversation. One was around the very practical details of what's needed in Salt Creek, which is the road and the toilet facility. And the second part of it was, and I don't know whether it was opportune or we talked about it and think about it, but it was that their intention is to do some master planning around that. We raised the issue that the park management plan for the Coorong National Park was developed in the 1980s, with very little done to it since then, and in no way represents a contemporary management plan. So what were the opportunities for us working with them to develop or to look at opportunities? So they had already started to think about whether there was a master plan needed of some of the particular areas around the Coorong National Park, and we were more than happy to say we would do that in partnership with them. So we're waiting for them to come back to us as to what that piece of work might look like.
They indicated they'd done similar work with a group of councils in the Flinders Ranges around this subject, so they had a bit of a template to work on. I remember being pretty encouraged that we were on a agenda. So the Council of Land.
Just to go back to the Salt Creek one, and we're talking about parking bays and toilets, exactly where were they interested in talking about given the land ownership in some of that area, and also the Salt Creek outlet area?
They didn't get down to that level, but probably this is where the Department of Infrastructure and Transport may come in. I think they accepted, and we pushed the point that there was no particular rest area along the Coorong at all of the nature of, say, the Duke's Highway, and that there probably was a need for a facility and probably a toilet in that area. And how that plays out and who's responsible is a different debate, I think. But there was no particular talk about a site. But I was quite happy when I left the meeting, and I thought they would at least consider it, which up to now hasn't been their preferred method. Because it is a bit of a joint responsibility, the road provider, us, and you, in my view. Councillor, sorry.
Yes, I'd be interested in someone's strategy around some of that
Yeah.
as we go forward.
So, Councillor
So
Hill.
what you're describing is something similar to the freeway toilets where you have to pull off and maybe it's a little.
I don't know that detail, but there's a little bit more class in that.
Oh, because I utilise the freeway, pull offs on a regular basis and the toilets are usually quite clean at certain times of the day, but no, I find it a great facility to be able to use, pull off and have a break, stretch and use the facilities.
So we obviously informed them that we had no land in particular there. I think that's an opportunity to Councillor Bland refer to the regulator to review with that area. It's probably pretty obvious to me, but to others. I think I actually pretty enthused out of the meeting because they were there to listen and to see where we can go forward. And they had examples from, say, Lower York and sort of Flinders Ranges where they work with similar processes.
Just to follow up on that, I think we have a previous minute on water service initially put up by Councillor, I think followed up by Councillor Arthur around that regulated area. And so we have the council supports.
They've got some work in this budgeted year on roads, etc. No, I came out of the meeting feeling it was well worth their while. If you got on, so they come in with a positive attitude. Any other questions around my report? There's been none. I'll move on. Sorry, Councillor Fong.
September the 7th, Tunbridge Street Party stakeholders meeting. And Mayor or maybe the CEO, what, Mr. Bill?
We were going to give you an update at the end of this meeting.
Yeah. Oh, so it was simply a stakeholder meeting last Monday. So we just, we think we'll do it at the end of this meeting. We might. Where we're at. Okay, we move on. 8.2, Councillor Arthur, your report. No questions? Move on to Councillor Lang's report. Any Councillor Lang wish to add to it? Councillor Kwon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors. You'll see there's a new report for me, but I did submit a written hard copy report to the office last Tuesday, and that unfortunately has gone broke. So you'll get a fourth monthly one in October.
I've already apologised to Councillor Coleman about that. It'll be stuck to somebody else on the road somewhere, but we haven't at this stage located.
Councillor Roundtree.
Through the chair, if I may.
Yeah.
Inquire of Councillor Roundtree, the Murrayland Riverland Landscape Board meeting. Were you there as a member of the board or as a council representative? If it's not a council
It
meeting.
wasn't clear. I think I was there as a member of this board. Yeah.
So that meeting should be removed from the council's report. It's not a council meeting.
It doesn't have to be a council meeting that, if this is about the activity that councillors have in the community, it doesn't have to be a council meeting because with due respect, councillors, we can get the meetings you attend from as a councillor quite easily, but this is about your interaction in the community as well.
That's how I understood it as well.
Not been made it clear.
Councillor Bland, sorry, I'm trying to interpret that. I'm going to leave the interpretation where it was.
Two things, and I think I can understand councillor Lang's point of view involved in the past. So there is variation in what can come from our reports. But my main point is to advise you, I don't have a written report from there, is that the representative of the year is school. Is going to next year, at the current time. I think we have quite fun.
Principal's going to do it.
I think it's. Yeah.
Very good.
And so, because my class is getting involved in.
No other reports, councillors, anything else to add, anyone? Councillor Hill is following the Mary Darling Association's conference while we're here. Notices of motion, councillor R, 9.1.1. You will move it as read.
Yes, we'll move the motion as read.
Councillor Kwame will second. Councillor R, you wish to speak?
I think I've explained reasonably well. We've got people down in council areas that Australia has got this anomaly of two different charging methods, and with the opportunity of the new landscape boards coming on board, it's perfect time for the minister to say, let's charge the same way. Because the anomalies between the way that the Lifestone Coast landscape board charge and the Riverlands, Lands is an anomaly to say the least. Their charging systems are very, very different. And they do the same job. And that's the thing that should be emphasised, that they're exactly the same job. And charging the right systems.
And also see
Are we aware of the other boards in the state? On fixed charge service. Anyone else? Councillor Coleman, you wish to speak to?
I think Mr. Mayor, just basically, I totally concur with Councillor Arthur, and that's what I said. It is he's got quality. I think it's a good idea.
Anyone else? Debate, councillor?
Yes, and more close to both, and also must work on their finance department. They're going to go through them. There'll be some instances where you've got on other properties are split, so you've got one charge in one area and one charge in another area, which is absolutely ridiculous. So debate votes.
Put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Carried unanimously. 1.1.2, Councillor Arthur, mobile black spot funding.
Therefore, I'll move that we receive that. Probably it's an interim after reading the comments from the CEO, an interim measure to prepare a submission for the priority to prepare a submission ready to the
The most complicated process that I have seen. So, in essence, round 5 finished, and there was some activity around that. And then there was some money left over from round 5, which was 5A, which was consultation back to the community about how things might proceed. And those findings haven't been released yet, and round 6 hasn't opened yet. The other thing that is probably you may or may not know is that councils can't actually apply to have anything happen under this arrangement. We have to actually have a telco in partnership, and the telco has to actually apply for any towers that need to be built. And sitting in parallel to that is some funding that we can apply for to help us, because telcos won't come to us for nothing, or do the work that we want for nothing. So there's also a program that provides some grant funding to councils when they do that submission. So we can be prepared with what we know in terms of black spots, and one of the recommendations is that we will do also a small community survey to see if we can supplement yours, Councillor Arthur, or if anything more, and be ready to go, assuming that the requirements are as they are, as we know now. There's no guarantee of that.
The last, unless the funding was changed, used to be the state government would apply, and the state government used to have to put funding in. And the last 3 or 4 submissions, the state government's only put in, say, $12 million, where Victoria put in 100. And so we virtually got no funding. The biggest funding outlet was for the APY lands about 3 years ago, because the state government wasn't put in. And at that stage, because we had a really, really bad coal patch, I remember, I can't find the minute, I think it was $18,000. We were submitting as council's contribution to our coal patch. So it is a submission. Is that yes.
So I'm aware that Kingston provided $50,000 towards their application. Now, whether they can grant funding or not, I'm not aware, but I know that it's not a small change in terms of what the telco is expecting in terms of the partnership. So we can be ready with what we know and ready to go based on what we know now. But then I think we need to be cautious that the rules may change because of the 5A consultation. And also there's around 6, then what are the requirements around 6? And there's no time frames that all the literature we found, we can't find time frames that.
Well, as we know that Tony was actually the chairman of this committee, and they are looking at different funding methods. But the thing is, we haven't been in since we put in for coal patch about 4 years ago, because the council doesn't apply. And we've always said we don't apply, but we've never done it. And I think this is one thing that really is crucial.
So, Councillor, speaking to your motion to respond, do you wish to add, given the question earlier, the Ralph area to your motion?
Oh, yeah, well.
As an item 6, on the list. You're fantastic, Matt. Yes or no?
I suppose just talking to it that I'll add the run.
Yes,
That area, if you like, is item 6. Make it easier.
Right, Councillor Lee and Councillor. You seconding, Councillor?
No.
Well, then you need a second. That's a Councillor Taylor, I think. Thank you.
And also,
You wish to speak?
I do.
Second.
So I'm at Wellington East, not in a long way away, it's 5 kilometres from Kellenben, 4 kilometres from the other tower, which is further south on the Leeds Road. And I have not had a mobile signal. I had a phone call this morning, I'm driving. So I'm hardly a great distance away, but I know from a lot of the members that in Marina itself, they also have huge difficulties with just getting a phone signal. So on the back of discussions this morning around looking at improving the profile of the district, it would be good to at least in our main townships have some form of decent signal. So I fully support this.
Okay. Councillor, I have Councillor Ling.
Thank you. I congratulate Councillor Arthur on his initiative, but it is nothing but a personal survey. We are a community of the Coorong district. A lot of other black spots throughout the area that we can speak of. One of our citizens has spoken to that about Naroom and deal with that problem. There's similar problems down around through 7 Mile Road and elsewhere. I don't support this motion. If the council is going to, we should be going out to the community, seeking full community input, not just a personal basis of whose friends the council are on his Facebook page.
Well, good to have friends, Councillor. Okay, that's fine. Councillor Roundtree will be next.
Yeah, I think this is a really good start. I think the extra probably hits extra ones that needed to be added. I don't think Councillor Arthur's motion in any way limits how much we can add in, or other areas we can improve. For instance, Duke, probably very much like that these mobile phone reception, and the black spots along the Dukes Highway and the main highway, which I've had that 3 or 4 times when you drive along that road. So I think we can expand that, we can do a thorough survey, and yeah, well,
So-
Councillor Marshall.
People note in the city response, in preparation for round 6, a short community survey to confirm mobile black spots identified within the Huron district and request details of the preferred mobile service providers and examine opportunities for grant funding. So I think take on board Councillor Lee's friendships, but I think, you know, and within there, my personal looking at that map is those areas are pretty accurately as very poor performing areas for a long time. Nonetheless, so Councillor Bland,
No,
well,
I can do both.
you will be the lead speaker.
In relation to just getting this motion, perhaps to include CEOs, information as well, but perhaps the council, the motion that agrees that the council see that as presented, and as a right of clear submission, basically refers to running that map. So in some ways, if that the council was right, that the perhaps the receiving map go out and just that the council as a priority for the issue of funding, and that then includes the opportunity for the CEO then to review. Otherwise, that refers to that fact that so the council will just take out receive the map presented and follow through on that then incorporate speakers.
Councillor, so you remove, receive the map as presented. That's good. You're happy to variate that motion and remove it.
Yeah.
Yes. The second,
You know, the motion.
the second is Councillor Taylor, right? Good.
We're going to start somewhere.
Not with your group.
Well, then, sorry, man, it just then becomes a council, what,
Yeah,
as a priority, prepare a submission ready for the next.
the nuances are on both sides of the debate. Put that way. Look, I take it.
Can I just,
No, I take it that the council will do a short survey and confirm the basic principles of your whatever, councillor, and I think there's enough room in motion to fit everyone's requirements.
yeah,
So at this stage, the second didn't want to change, so right by that, barring you moving an amendment.
Three, Mr. Mayor, on the amendment. That the amendment read that council has a priority for submission ready for the next qualified tax funding following community consultation.
So move Councillor Land, seconded Councillor Ling. Council as a priority prepare a submission ready for the next federal government mobile black spot funding round. Opportunity.
I think we have to have a program because there is no funding under the black spot arrangements. It's a program that we can participate in and we can get funding through a grant arrangement and a relationship with the telco, and we can't actually apply. The telco has to apply. We can only be a partner in an application from a telco.
I think that was the problem with the callback. Office will have. It's outbound government uniform.
Waiting Councillor Lang is the second, so as long as he's happy with his monitor.
Yes.
Following the undertaking. I think the, I have to adjust the word as the CEO to, as there is no actual funding, so that may be
Even if it was, even if it was, we can't apply. Yeah, we have to have a relationship or partnership with the government.
prepare a document on this.
Councillor Taylor, on the amendment.
I'm sure, could we not move all together next federal government will that program in favour of any funding program available for maybe not even black spot because reduced service or narrowing it down to federal government mobile black spot.
We could, with a mover of the amendment, could.
In replacing it with what we use. I'm not making change.
Not take away the word next. Programs with yes. Round 6, potentially. I think we're making our work now. Councillor Taylor, you're still sort of.
Question, how do we not come up with state funding?
We don't. But we do. The state has some funding in the club. Never know you are.
Should that be mobile black spot program funding?
There is no funding. That's right.
That's part of what Tony Faster is, the chair, and that's what they are looking at, is the funding model. So there will be federal money, how it will be allocated is unknown at this stage.
But for you, yeah, under the current arrangements, 5A was a consultative arrangement and we're waiting to figure out that. I suspect that's what
Yes, that was the interim.
Patton is looking at. And the other one then is, I suspect that will then influence what round 6 looks like.
His indication will be involved.
That may be the case, Councillor.
You know, particularly in rural areas, you know, because they want the dollars in the answer.
Councillors, I think we're nearly there. Chasing out time. Does anyone else wish to speak for or against the amendment? Councillor Bland, debate on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy with that. It's broad enough that this year in there, whether there be future funding or not, but also to be confident in this period that we need to work with in and in prioritize
So, the amendment is that Council has a priority to prepare a submission ready for the federal government mobile black spot programs following the undertaking of community consultation. I'll put the amendment. Always in favour. Those against, that's carried unanimously as it comes to motion. Any further amendments? Yeah. No further discussion. Councillor Arthur, you the right to close the debate. Amendment is voted on motion. So voted.
I'm happy with it.
Right, councillor, so you're voting on the same process as the motion now. All those in favour? Those against, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillors 9, point something, it could be something. Two. Motions without notice, councillor? There is none. We're on to item 10, Office of the Chief Executive Officer's report. Number 1, revocation of motion 14420. Perhaps, councillor, someone speak, please, first. Yeah, just explain it, please.
Yes, sure. So we received a request to rename Thorn Barn Road. Application occurred, it was brought back to council and it was moved to rename that road. As the report says, we heard from the Thornley family who were very disappointed to hear that the name would change, and they provided quite a significant history attached to the name of that road. So we contacted the original applicant, who was quite happy to withdraw the request to rename the road. She just realised there was all that history attached to it, so she couldn't withdraw it. She was actually contacted the about it. So due diligence we need to withdraw or revoke, and the has the ability to do that.
Councillor Land. Thank you. Is there a second? Councillor Land. Councillor Land, would you speak?
No, it's good to hear that perhaps after even though check off has got back to the course of the learning history.
But I note that road naming is always a difficult stuff. What I would note, and I don't know whether we should take more care of sort of moving the process earlier than we did from taking a period of time. Because I want to do it. But we tend to learn stuff at the end of the process with it. Councillor Kwong.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, just a comment. I think it's quite generous and graceful of Mr. coming to withdraw it.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else adding to this? None. Councillor Van. Put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? It's carried unanimously. Number 2, councillors, review of the Civic Prayer. There is a recommendation. Councillor Taylor. Councillor Taylor moves. I think I heard Councillor Grant for the second. Huh? Councillor Taylor. Okay, Councillor Roundtree. Open it to any other councillors to add to this debate.
Just like the next Mr. Mayor, or a few people said, we can't have much to do. If this is the only thing we're worried about.
Yes, we deal with it quickly then, Councillor. Anyone else wishes to add to this? Councillor Kwong.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I find the original as it is up to scratch and comprehensive, and we're in a multi-cultural world we live in. And just because it says God doesn't mean it has to be Christian. And I think the way the presence of the prayer should stay the way it is.
Thank you. Councillor Lang.
Thanks, Mayor. I believe this will go through with full support from all members. The title, Civic Prayer, obviously is going to have to be modified to reflect it will be a civic declaration.
Don't raise the question. If it just was to get up, what would be the headline? Affirmation is a word of suitable.
affirmation is the word that if people who don't want to take the oath, follow that, use an affirmation, so. it has to know really.
Okay. Anyone else wish to do the debate? Okay, I'm going to read out what this will become. It's become a civic affirmation, replace the civic prayer, and it would read: "We gather today to duly and faithfully carry out our duties to the best of our judgment and ability, for the advancement of this district and the benefit of all of our community and fellow citizens." We'll read and pass this today. Put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. 7-1. Thank you, Councillor Gorman. Mr. Russell. Where is it? We move on to the next one, which is the acknowledgement of country. Councillor Hill, thank you. I'd like to move. Thank you for the page. Can we move that entire block motion before? That's one. Yeah, so we're moving the entire page. Thank you, Councillor Hill. There's a second. I'll take Councillor Taylor. Actually.
Which one are we doing?
We're on item 3, acknowledgement of country.
Yeah, but which one of the recommendations?
All of them. That's my recommendation.
So what do we do at Peak? Where there's no Aboriginal claim, it's not happening.
So I have asked this question, Councillor. Sorry, I'll start this debate before I let Councillor Hill speak. There is a defined line, as we had in the workshop reasonably soon. So I would take it if the presiding member, whoever is chairing the meeting, is in the area defined by the notionary claim, the notionary is now settled claim, I might add. They would use the word notionary people. If they were not at this stage, it would be the NARCAT people. We also acknowledge that there's a piece at the southern end of our council that is, I suppose, under some contestability at this stage. We call welcome the First Nations of the South East people, and pending that being resolved, we would then perhaps amend or defer to that. That's our position. Recognise that we met in Tintinara, we were the NARCAT people. We met at the Nowman, we were the legendary people on site. We met at the Kerman tennis courts, we would be legendary, but we met in my front yard, we would be NARCAT.
If at any time you're uncertain of that, then you don't acknowledge the particular group, you leave that and you just acknowledge the First Nations people. But there will be times in that.
So I am number 3. I'll just, yes, Councillor, I'll ask Councillor Hill, she didn't know if we should speak.
I had a long history involved with the people. I find this is a very good initiative to expand our current acknowledgement and population, and I see that as something I'd like to be involved in.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor, you wish to add to the second?
So that it's very well written. Thank you for your work.
Councillor Ling.
Question from you, Chair. That seems a little bit convoluted. Is there a requirement for us to actually nominate the traditional custodians of the area? Can we just reduce the two different statements contained in point 1 to one statement by deleting recognition of known jury in the market? It's just a problem. People don't know whose area it's from.
So, Councillor, could we do something different? Well, we could. It's a bit like me saying, I'm from Tintinara, I'm from Canal. So we could have a nice little print, like a little piece of card or something, like that. I suppose I take on that this district, not even 200 years old, and the Indigenous people have done lots of things, lots of things. In that respect, I feel it would be only reasonable to acknowledge what now been determined as their patch of land. So, yeah, I've struggled with my first recommendation to not be sort of simpler, but after reading the report, I think I've come down to that. I don't know if that helps you at all, but just taking that on board. But generally, we'll meet with that very land, just by the way this works out for us in this area. Perhaps we could. Yeah.
So our advice from reconciliation saying was to name the land that will stand on at this time. It's not referring to another British land. On that, and here on that ground, that's that land, that's who we're acknowledging. And that's why we have to go to.
A bit like saying I'm a Victorian council.
I'm not asking the question.
No, the question.
What's wrong with the previous acknowledgement? Acknowledged all. So, and that's what everybody's saying. What's wrong with the existing one? Why do you have to change or change its purpose? That's all.
Chamber requested the opposite. Councillor, sorry, Councillor Kwong. Councillor Taylor. No. Councillor Kwong, sorry, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I was previous with the other motion, I think it should just left the way it is because it's too confusing and there's a risk of embarrassing or causing what would you call it, insult to the wrong Indigenous people. And I think the other one worked fine. The Full District Council acknowledges the traditional owners of the land in which we meet. It's all encompassing, short, sweet, and done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, do you take the existing indigenous acknowledgement free sign? I know, yeah, like you're going to vote on this.
Well, so what I advise you, Councillor, is if you felt that the existing one was satisfactory, if you vote against this, because it does say council place. But if you vote against this, council wouldn't be replaced. Previous acknowledgement of the country with the following. That's what I advise you could do. Second point I would say is in the second paragraph, we acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment in relation to Aboriginal people to the country, pay our respect to elders past and present. We also extend that respect to all First Nation people. That is not in our present acknowledgement, the best I know. But that is part of this. Yeah. So if you felt that the present acknowledgement of the country was all right, I advise you to vote against this. I then would accept a motion if someone wanted to add that second paragraph to that. I wouldn't think that would be a variance with the process. It would be a new motion, but on the subject. Question?
Just one comment.
Last second amendment.
It's not up to me. It's up to the residents, right? So why it's what's wrong with them? So I'm there to represent them, and that's what they want. So I'm voting to maintain this quo.
Okay. Especially if anyone wants to speak to this motion. You've got a question, yes?
As there's been a couple of statements made that were confusing as to where we are when we're doing these acknowledgements. If the staff be able to give the person doing the acknowledgement in direction in which place they are able to acknowledge rather than cause any confusion or something like that.
What we propose if this amendment, if this motion goes through, is that we will do a little ballot card for each of you. And on one side will be for the Nigerian people, and on the other side will be for Naga. And then we'll also have one that's a general one, because there will be times you won't know where you are. And if you speak to most Indigenous people, they are then more than happy. And I take your comment that we don't want to embarrass anybody, but I think they generally, it's about the acknowledgement rather than us missing something. So there will be a more generic one, which will really just be out reference to either Naga or Nigeria, and then go on to the second sentence. So there'll be basically three for you to use wherever you may be at any time within the district. And we can send you a little map if that's what you need to support you. After a period of time, this will just become second nature. And the people where you're actually meeting will guide you as well. You only have to ask local people and they'll tell you exactly where you are.
Anyone else on this motion? Councillor Hill, would you like to vote? Thank you. So the motion is as it was in the agenda. Put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Declare the motion carried. 5 votes to 3. So the councillor voting for it were Councillor Land, Hill, Taylor, Roundtree and Simmons. The councillors voting against it were Councillors Lang, Wyman and anyone else should add into that process? Okay, thanks. I move on. Code of conduct number 4, estimated costs. The recommendation there, councillors. Councillor Bland moves, I presume, that recommendation. Councillor Taylor, you second the motion, do you? Thank you. Any discussion around that cost basis, that motion? Close it, councillor Bland. Put the recommendation. All those in favour? Those against? Taking that you voted for it, councillors Hill and Hart. Hands are in the most interesting positions I've seen. I'm declaring them carried unanimously. Please. For 11, council policy, Neil, 12, section 41, councillor Plummer. And with that recommendation. Council received the minutes of the Coorong Finance Committee meeting on the 18th of August. Councillors Bowman and Roundtree, you seconded.
I would like to add a little bit more to the motion.
Well, perhaps you went out on one of those.
I just think it probably needs to say at the end of that noting that the current figures were not available at the time of that meeting and were to be provided to council in September 2020. So I think just accepting the minutes of that meeting did not provide the figures that were coming to this meeting, so it sort of seemed to try to accept it when they were coming to this meeting. That makes sense. So I would present the figures here. So how can we accept that without at least qualifying and saying we accept and receive the minutes held on the 18th of August, noting that the current figures were not available at the time of the meeting, were to be provided to council in September 2020 meeting.
Are they provided in September?
Yes. We need to clarify that.
Council, receival of minutes. This is an obvious error. Really there for option. Yeah, I'll take on board what you're saying, because that was the
So where do you make that recommendation?
then I'm told. See, I can read it out.
So number 13 is exactly what you're saying, Councillor Roundtree. No, so it is part of the receiving of the report.
So you did, so because it's in the minutes, it doesn't need to be in the motion.
Back to the original.
Then I'm happy to say.
That's one. Yeah, you still in favour of. Anyone else wish to speak around that recommendation? Okay, no one does. Councillor Clive closes. Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Number 13, community and corporate report. Item 1, solar panels. The remover. Councillor Bond, removing. Your second. Councillor Bland. Councillor Coleman, do you wish to speak to me?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just briefly, in one of my general ambitions were help save our council some money. This has been on our books since 2016. However, I do see a financial implication of 50,000, and through the chair to the CEO, there's money put aside for this project.
Now we will be an adjustment to the budget.
Councillor Taylor and Councillor Roundtree.
Is that a $50,000 borrowing or an adjustment to renting?
Which it will be a capital expenditure predominantly because it's actually physical things to be buying, some of it will be operational. We can do it one of two ways. We can look at what our budget looks like and leave it to the third quarter to do an adjustment if we need to. But, or we can do it now. Either way, we think that probably there will be enough space in the capital budget for us to do this within our resources, but we can come back to you if we needed to do an adjustment in the third quarter. We can leave it to the last minute.
Further, Mayor, it says later on about the IEMO is taking the opportunity to certain road requirements either switch off the in or whatever. Do we know anything much about the actual solution? So is it just a pure back to the grid solution, or would the council be able to draw off that power by the inverters before it goes back to the grid so that we don't lose it? And is it just purely based on feeding into the grid with some form of tariff?
We would need to, that would be one, and I suspect, and I don't know for certain, but that each provider may do that slightly differently. So, well, we really do need to get now 3 firm, I suppose, propositions from a contractor to work out what is the best one and then go to market. So there is no provision for us to use batteries as part of the storage capacity because that is too expensive and prohibitive. That was really just to flag that that is an issue on the table generally across the state, but we don't think it will impact significantly if we went to solar.
No, about sorry, rather if we rather than battery storage, so the inverter would just be an inverter rather than the inverter charger. But the inverter itself, it's just having the capacity within an office and making use of the sun that's shining on the roof by the office first is being able to take that power directly rather than being reliant on if we're not able to switches it off. If they switch it off, we've got no. You know, if it's a really good day and everybody's drawing through the grid and they decide, well, too much power, let's switch it off, you lose that financial advantage at that point in time.
Well, my understanding of this is that it's back into the grid. You're saying not to do completely, aren't you, Councillor?
No, I'm not. I'm just saying that you're having the opportunity to take that power directly, or it goes into the grid. Or if AEMO were to stop the demand coming in to the grid from individual users, you could then actually take the power off yourselves before it, because if it's not going into the grid, the solar control is just going to shut it down, and they're not taking it, but you're not using it either. And if it's a high usage there, it would be beneficial to use that power. Because at the moment, all you're relying on is putting all of the solar on the roof and feeding it in and getting a relief tariff back, which is dropping all of the time. Therefore, and it's quite a sizable system for the general bed. If you're not able to take advantage of that power yourself before feeding the excess into the grid, then kind of will take forever to be in by the cost of the actual tunnels.
The three men, we would make sure that was a feature then of whatever contract we use to put the power on, so that we can, as you say, use the power first before putting the grid, and we're not affected by the way outages and also the vagaries of the tariff reducing all the time. Correct.
How many, did you go to 10 for this?
We contacted 3 providers. If the chamber wants us to continue with this, we will then go through a proper procurement process.
I would also query your payback. Gone through a commercial, a couple of commercial things with this, and it's definitely not. The 23 KVA system will not get payback in 5 years.
So we're relying, and we will do due diligence.
That's right.
Once.
So this is just a request to go on further and send it out for quotation. Okay. It's not a fait accompli.
No, sorry, Councillor, I think I'm misleading you there. The intention is for the chamber to make a decision about whether they want solar or not, and then we will go to the procurement process, taking into account the features that Councillor Taylor has just mentioned. And the concerns you might have, but if not, or just to explore the issue further, to actually then move to solar.
Yes,
Wanted to say the officer that calculated all this dedicated to their time.
Councillor Tully, you wish to add to this technically, I hope not in the debate.
So the payback period would be dependent on tariffs. Therefore, if you're offsetting your obviously bills, but if you're drawing directly from the panels, then your bills will be reduced and not dependent on the actual tariff coming in. So, which is why with the tariff reducing, it's important to be able to take off directly from the panels through an office, because unlike households, which very often the people are at work during the day, so they're not able to take advantage of the actual solar which is coming into the system. In an office situation, when you've got time sunlight and power, 9 to 8, 5 or whatever it is, if you're able to take that off during that time of the day, that then would reduce your payback. So I'd say in that instance, once a year, it would be because if you're able to do that, because you're offsetting, you're paying less regarding your bills. So you're not relying on the early adopters who have huge tariffs in order to encourage people.
Certainly. Councillor Glenn, I don't know if you had the email. You had this.
I think Councillor Lane.
No, but I'm sorry to hear this for hand like a long time.
Well, I was just going to speak not so much to the particular side. We've had solar panels for many years, and it keeps getting dropped off purely because we haven't put capital funding to do something about it. And I would use further with appropriate quotes. How that might look and the CEO and appropriate office.
Councillor Lang, sorry.
Yes, based on the question that you made, my understanding the solar panels, they do have a short lifespan, 5 to 10 years. We need to be also considering what the replacement cost will be after 10 years.
That's what you made. That could be an asset, like we would look at every other asset, what the replacement schedule is. In our long-term financial planning, we would have that we would do that 28 we would have to either refurbish them, if that's the case, if the technology is changing quite quickly, whether we replace them or whether there's completely different technology out there in the market at that time. So it's no different to any other asset in that sense. Then it has to
Years, they only lasted 3 years. I've been there 16 years.
Councillor Taylor, technical advice, yeah.
They are like expectancy of solar panel, the old blocks, still going to 25 years. So you do get a reduction in It's down to about 80% and 70%, but they're still lifed in between 20 and 30 years. What's going to go first would be the inverter.
Who else wishes to add to this debate? Okay. I might again comment that this has been a discussion. Climate since 2016, I imagine. One of the items that was mentioned that could be funded was not going, while it's not exactly in our budget as this online item. There was an allowance to borrow for a group of projects in the budget. Everyone understood that. So I think at some point we've got to stand and deliver, because we sort of jump around it. It's only one way to find out whether this one works is whether we can put it on our swim smarts and step in, I suppose. Ladies, Councillor Wildman will close the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just think that at last we get done and save us money, and thanks to Councillor Taylor for providing the technical report. There is two ways to get your time of repayment is by the tariff, and of course how much we save by parenting yourself during the day. So it's a worthwhile asset, and I've had just for the Chamber's information in the 18 years I've had, it was on my house and it's still working not quite well. And it's good to see it mentioned that we're going to look at the swings later on to run and supplement their energy requirements.
Thank you, Councillor. Everyone's aware. Motion is as the recommendation of the body. Yes. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item number 2, draft annual financial statements for the year ending 30 June 2020. At this point, welcome Rex. Rex Mooney, our financial consultant, is coming up on Zoom. Hi Rex. Right.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody.
Apology at this stage. There's a recommendation, councillors. I'd probably prefer someone move it first. Councillor Taylor. Second, Councillor Bland, who would want Rex to speak to it a bit in the broad sense, Rex?
I can do that if you like.
Could we rescind meeting procedures?
Yes, I will suspend meeting procedures for the lead of the meeting. All right, councillors. 5 minutes, Rex.
Okay. Well, there's a fairly comprehensive written report that goes with the financial statements. I haven't actually been involved in putting them together, other than sort of having an oversight and setting due dates and basically breaking it up into segments for staff to put together. But I've done a bit of a assessment on it, and I know a bit about what's going on here. So I'll just point out a few things to you. So I've got a hard copy I'm looking at, so I'll be going by the page numbers from the financial statements, not the page numbers in your agendas. So we start at page number 2. That's the statement of comprehensive income. Okay, you can see that there's if you go down to the operating surplus deficit, it's a $921,000 surplus, which is a pretty good result. Particularly where we sort of started off with that budget a fair way back. It's 386,000 better than what we forecast in budget review 3, and that's primarily due to staff positions we expected to have filled weren't filled throughout that final quarter of the year, and so that's where a majority of the improvements come from.
Rex, can I just 1 minute? You said most of that, yet the expenditure for staff is only $200,000 under budget from what was from last year. So this 386,000 couldn't all be from savings on wages.
That view made, no, predominantly, I think we've said, Councillor. You also notice that material and contract expenses are slightly lower than what we predicted at the third quarter. That was a combination of things. It wasn't all entirely due to staffing arrangements. There were other factors.
Yeah. And just
The actual figure for budget review 3 was 4.709 million. We ended up incurring 4.350 million. So that's an improvement of 359,000. So yeah, there's $20,000 of other swings and roundabouts that account for the rest of it. But primarily that's what that's the reason for the better than budget review 3 performance.
Well, in our grants, subsidies and contributions, 5.2 million, and the 1.7 million down further. Why isn't that included into the grants? That's grant, which it is. Why is it being included?
Okay, because what they're for, they're amounts that you've received specifically for the construction of new assets.
Yes.
Okay, and the accounting standards require them, because effectively they're capital and they're new assets, the accounting standards require them to be reported beneath the line, so underneath the operating surplus. And if you're looking for a list of what makes that number up,
yes,
we can go to the top of page, what number is it? CC4. Okay, and it breaks down what the various projects are that 1.75 million relates to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, while you're on that page 64, while you're there, it's got land care grants, which is the backlog thing. There was over $1 million in grants for that last year. So how come it's only 606,000?
Okay, let me have a look.
What page you on?
64, page 12. Oh, page 12. You're looking at page 12.
Okay, so what I suspect is, so you're going forward to note number 2, page 12 of the financial statements.
Yeah, page 12, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so you're saying the land care grants are 606,000?
But the 1920 year, I think we received $1 million in land care, like flat grants.
So some of the lab grants are for projects that go over multiple years. So there would be some dividing out those amounts.
The money, you still got to put money in the year we received, and we received it this year.
I can't tell you off the top of my head, Councillor, how much we actually received for lab this year, and unless you know, Rex, that I don't know off the top of my head.
No, look, I'm not sure where the $1 million figure comes from Councillor Arthur, but what I suspect is that it might have been an estimate at some stage, and perhaps it hasn't been received as yet, and it'll be received early in the 2021 financial year. But I think we need to take that question on notice.
Yeah.
What specifically is your question, Councillor Arthur?
Well, we received about $1 million in flat.
What are you basing that on?
From the list from as the lab grants are coming through.
Sorry, I can't quite hear you.
From the list where the lab grants are coming through, I've got it here in front of me. It's actually $1,098,333.
And which report was that in that you're talking about?
Sorry?
Which report are you referring to there that you've got in front of you?
This is the grants 2019, 2020 grants received by the lab.
Okay, I'm not sure. I don't think I've seen that report. When was that report produced?
Well, in the June.
So end of June. Okay, well we'll take that on notice. If we can get a copy of that report.
I don't know if these things, if some of them actually get included as capital.
No, where they get spent's another thing. But just looking through what makes up the 1.715 million, there doesn't appear to be any LAP grants included in that. So like I said, I think we just need to take that one on notice.
While you take continue with the suspension of pending orders, councillors, 5 to 10 minutes. 10 minutes. I'm going to give you another 10 to 3:35. Councillor Roundtree, you have some questions?
It's preliminary small one, Rex. So I don't know, I've got page 63 of 190, that might be interesting. You may know what I'm referring to. So in statutory charges in 19, there was 4,000 in parking fines and expiation fees. I was just interested in what council issued those for. We don't have any. What is that generally for 4,000?
Sorry, would you be able to repeat that question for me, Mr. Mayor? I've got a really bad reception here, and I just can't hear. I couldn't hear hardly any of that.
Page 11
Yeah.
is under statutory charges from the
Yeah.
council. The page, there is an amount of parking fines and expiation fees of $4,000 in 2019, nothing in 2020.
Yeah, look, again, I'd be surprised if that should be zero. We'd need to take that on notice as well and just find out where they've gone, but it's obviously been included in another account somewhere. But I would have expected, unless there just weren't any fines issued for the year.
And so you read, that could be the case with COVID, and that there's a considerable reduction in activity around that type of thing. And if it is abandoned vehicles, I know there hasn't been a lot of activity in that area.
Usually low.
Yeah.
That's right. I don't even know we put out fines for abandoned vehicles, but that's
Yeah. All right, other questions, councillors? Or other questions on suspension of orders?
I've just got one more.
You got one?
I've got a so I won't worry about them. I'll push them through to the CEO. There's just one with local action planning with reserves. And we've got reserves of 441,000.
Page, councillor.
Page 24, or on your iPad is
24, Rex.
Thank you.
on your iPad is page 76. We've got this is a carryover from 2 years ago, 441,000. We've used, we've added 35 to it. Gives us 476 in other reserves. You've got the CWMS reserves, so these are reserve funds. How come, because some of the grants from LAP are over 2 to 5 years, we haven't included that into that scheme, or where are we putting that? Are we just putting that in as deferred liabilities? Where you get a grant, say for example, we've got a grant for $243,000 and it goes over 3 years. So we're putting that into that LAP reserve fund for 2 years, because we're only spending, say, a third this year, or are we putting it in under deferred liabilities in the balance sheet?
Okay, I see your point, and so what I've done is I've just turned back a page to page 23, and you see there's an amount there called payments received in advance of 994,000. Yep. Okay, I reckon what that represents, and a portion of that will be the extra 400,000 you're looking for the LAP grants. But what that is, that's income that we've received for specific purposes, so that it's attached to a specific project. We've received it in the 2019-20 year, but it won't actually be spent until the 2021 year. So effectively, we store it in the balance sheet as a liability and then reverse it out in the 2021 year as income. And so if let's say we're looking at page 24, and I haven't prepared these statements, so I don't know how accurate they are, but I'd like to assume that they're accurate, or they wouldn't have been put out. But let's say that 476,000, if you add that to the 600 odd thousand that's in note 2, well, there's roughly $1 million, Councillor Arthur. Yeah. And so what I suspect is, out of that 994,000 on page 23, 476,000 of that would be LAP grants received in advance. But I'd need to, like I said, take that on notice, but on the surface, they would be reasonable assumptions to make.
Well, one of the assumptions then would be the $1.6 million we got for roads in advance for 2021 should show in there too.
All right, now you're getting into really technical stuff, and it's a very good point, and I'd agree with you. Okay, but the thing is, those grants are what they call untied grants. Now, you noticed before I used the words specifically grants tied to specific projects. So untied grants, like the one you mentioned, they are treated differently. They're treated such that you need to report for them as income in the year that they're received, even though the expenditure might not be incurred until the following year. So I can understand that being a bit confusing for people, but that's the new and improved accounting standards, guaranteed to make things more complicated for everybody. But the simple answer is if you've got a grant that's tied to a specific activity or project, and that activity or project hasn't been completed, and the costs will be incurred in the following year, well, then you carry the grant into the following year. If you receive grant income that isn't specifically identified for a project, well, then you need to record that in the year in which you receive the cash, which is what's happened with the financial assistance grants. Hopefully that makes sense.
Taylor.
Quick question, this is an easy one, rates, on page 17. What does an explanation for what does rates postponed for state stimulus mean?
That's a scheme that state government uses that if you're a payment.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, could you repeat that question again, please?
Questions around.
Seniors postponement, so basically seniors can postpone it and then it's.
Oh, okay.
Budget.
We've got none for this year.
You may not get any applications.
Yeah. Councillor Taylor.
For you, Mayor. So, Rex, speaking on the subject of reserves, the CWMS, so it explains something that hasn't really been well explained in the past. Council brought down something like 1.1 million in fees from ratepayers to CWMS, and we end up with roughly half of that going into the reserve. Some of that reserve will be spent on renewal of assets for the depreciation, to cover depreciation. But this now shows 870,000 sitting in reserves. Can you give me some more information on that?
Again, on the surface, what that tells me is that, okay, so you've got a range of, you're obviously charging service charges for your CWMS, and the service charge is generally set at a level that's going to recover whole of life costs. And so it might actually be, well, it's usually more than what the annual maintenance costs are of your CWMS. And so what effectively is, this is a bit of a running balance, because council's not allowed to, any excess in funds that it collects in service charges, it needs to quarantine for spending at a future date on the CWMS. So long story short is, you've collected 870,000 more than you've spent on capital and operating in relation to your CWMS. And so effectively that money's quarantined or identified as being available for renewals or for spending on maintenance. But it's more of a statutory thing. Really, what you spend on your renewals and what you spend on your maintenance forms part of your asset management plan, and in the immediate 12 months, it forms part of your annual budget, either in the operating expenditure section or the capital expenditure section. But it's really just a notional figure to demonstrate that council is keeping track of what it's raising and what it's spending on its CWMS services.
So that kind of says to me that in 2019, see, 2019 we had a reserve of 635. That reserve is now gone up by another 235,000.
That's
so
right.
If we're not allowed to charge more than we actually need in order to operate the scheme, why is it going up when we have it?
No, you see, See, that's across the whole of life. Okay, so you've to work out what the service charge is, you need to sort of do an estimate of what it's going to cost to run over the entire cycle, and there's going to be times when you're going to have that amount will actually be in negative, or it won't be a reserve. And then so effectively what you're doing is you're collecting money that will be spent on, say, a complete pump refit or something that costs, $500,000 or $1 million to do at some stage in the future. And I think you've also got a number of CWMSs from memory, haven't you? Isn't there several of them? Is that right?
All
So you may end up coming up with a situation whereby all 4 of them need some major work done within a space of 2 or 3 years, and so you might end up having to spend $1.5 or $2 million on it, in which case that reserve would go into negative. Okay, so it's really you're not collecting more than, it's not worked out on a year-by-year basis. It's worked out on the total estimated useful life of the system. So it's a fairly complicated exercise to work out what a service charge is. But in this year, we've spent 235,000 more than we've collected. In another year, that might be a number in the next column over, transfer from reserve. That might be minus 500,000. But it's really just a running total to demonstrate that we're keeping track and making sure that we're setting aside funds, if need be, to renew things in the future.
The thing was, this year, Rex, we spent 585,000 on capital and still had a $235,000 excess surplus.
Well, that sort of broadly makes sense, because you generated roughly $1 million in service charges, and if you add the 235 and the capital and some maintenance, that should square it back to what the movement is.
585 spent on Taylor Beck.
Okay, councillors. No further questions? If there is no more questions, councillors Taylor and Blaine move this process. The second group. No more questions. Thank you, Rex, for the second or for the process. I'm going to bring us back into manual procedure, council. I have a mover and a seconder. I move Councillor Taylor. I think yes, and second Councillor Bland. Happy. Councillor Taylor, you'll close debate. There is none. Thank you. Therefore, I'll put the motion item 3. All those in favour? Vote. All those in favour? Those against? I'm declaring that unanimously before us. Break in 5 or 10 minutes.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. I'll catch you all later.
Great time. Cheers.
See ya.
Number 4, proposed renaming of Roberts Point. Number 4, certification of authority. Number 3, there is a recommendation there. For myself and the CEO to sign the documents. Councillors Roundtree and Land. Any discussion around that? Being none, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you for reminding and getting ahead. Number 4. Proposed renaming of Rob's Point. Councillor Land.
I'd like to declare see conflict of interest. I am the author of the request on behalf of hanging field elders from the Coolum area. And it is a perceived only. It is not a community group that I've done this report on behalf of. So I will choose to stay in the room. I will not vote.
Thank you, councillor. You're moving recommendation. Councillor Landon, secondly. That is, move councillor Hill, second councillor Landon, in relation to the renaming of Rob's Point Council Advisory Officer, Surveyor General of council support for the locality to be duly named. What Rob's Point, Wirracum, help me count, Wirracum. Do the best I can. Councillor who wishes to speak to this?
I support this recommendation, and I would like to actually see it expand across the whole council district where appropriate, that dual naming of what's interest and I obviously will be adopted at some point. I know there is big support out on Federal Road for other renaming, and I think it's a good first step into acknowledging the local conditions.
You, Councillor Land.
I just thought what Councillor was set up had the same discussion and information around, and I think need results out of the dual name, just giving that kind of part. That started some years ago, and
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak to this motion? Close debate. Closed. Thank you. The motion, all those in favour? Vote against, that's carried unanimously, and Councillor Ling did not vote. Number 5, we'll deal with the next 3 if we can, please. Community Land Management Plan, Settlement over. Report, the recommendation, is there a mover? Councillor Ling, you're moving the recommendation as read. Councillor Wyman, I think I'll take you as the seconder, is that what you're indicating? Councillor Taylor, are you wishing to speak? If one trying to be a seconder.
No, I wish to speak.
Your time is now.
It's really about obviously keeping the Taliban law community matters. To the board for a start, but also the health and well-being of the football club. I'm just not quite sure because the map was not included. I'm not quite sure about the allotments. Are the allotments inclusive of the secondary piece of community land, which is above the second bit?
The second bit, section 23.
The bit that was rezoned in the last.
Yeah, that's section 23. The same will council up to that.
Yeah.
Inclusive of previously occupied and the expansion of them.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of you chance to lead on.
Don't need to. Again, for those who really want to, when this sort of thing comes up and there's no map provided, there is a free government map system, nature maps, which will give you that all. Actually, got the active here. Exactly where those options.
So the executive apologises for not including it. Probably something to eventually establish the road hierarchy, a couple of things we might need to do a new form of maps for each council. Anyone else wish to add to this debate? Councillor Arthur.
Yeah, just remember that the map on to go ahead with this except to agree to the public consultation. You should go to public consultation first, and then we'll have to leave. So,
Councillors, one. Yes, some people will say. So I'm proposing we had a 10-minute. Right in the meeting, 3:45, and we'll contain some maps. We've got a bit of sense by councillors, so we're having a
There's been most of I asked you this morning.
the same for the next.
Because I don't.
We can get that up for the next chapter, 10 minutes. The 3:45.
Yes, you on the day. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think about it?
And now I agree with
At 3:57. And you've just been going through the maps of this agenda item and the next one. The councillors, we're on the one in relation to the tail bend oval. You can see the extension in a straight line to the north. That's the area we're talking about. That's part of 23. North boundary isn't even at the edge of the town. It's further on than and Webb Street comes to Corman. Comes around on the Trevor Road or Granite Road. Yeah, so. Within the town. Let's do it in the town, yeah.
Or nearly, the oval is existing.
This would deal with.
This way you can see the oval.
Yeah.
And where the boundary is, sort of on the right hand side, is that where existing bit is?
Yeah, it's just
where the existing bit.
Just read out the numbers as you're showing.
So that is existing oval and Yeah, so the new bit you're going to, that saying double the size of the existing.
Nearly doubling the size of the existing list. I get the director to speak to the subject, if I may.
Sure. So we've had a few meetings with the town bed, football club and netball club, and then the club committee. So the extra land is in the future proofing for potentially a hub, sporting hub up there, and that will give room for that to occur, should that occur. There already needs to be extra space for the proposed netball courts. Anyway,
You're saying that the area above 1
yes,
is directly above the second stage. Okay.
yes. So this white area, yeah, highlighted area.
Well, excellent.
Had a question.
You can have a question.
In light of the image that's been supplied to us, extending the community area, I agree with. That's not changing the cadastral boundary of allotment 23, though.
No.
Because you couldn't do
No, that's right. It's not able to change the boundary.
it. It's simple, I mean,
No, it's a management plan for the land. That's what the community land management plan is.
Let's have
I'm confused. So on the, I am confused because on the DPA, the last DPA, the grey portion above the oval went from primary production to community zone. So where they put the round oval, the grey bit above went from primary production to community zone. But the bit to the right, so 105, which is the industrial zone, was rezoned from community to industrial. And then the dog leg that you're on about is to the right of 105.
Now, it's part block 23. So it's that part that's highlighted of 23 that we're talking about. Partly, yeah. So the DPA has nothing to do with the community land management plan.
Yeah,
The zoning.
that, what I'm thinking is that is that definitely
Yes,
owned by council?
yes.
So what is it zoned as?
I'm not referring to planning and zoning today. This is community land management plan. And making it community land.
But do we know what it is? It's not primary production land, or, because I thought it was primary.
No, my understanding is isn't. I just can't recall what it is. Find out what it is. I'm sorry, I didn't look at the development plan because that's not relevant today.
So your positive is owned by council, because we don't want a canal job where a fellow went to sell his land and found the council had changed the land use into the community use, and he couldn't sell it.
23 is one of those blocks we discussed some time back. And it had some native vegetation on it.
No.
Remember that?
No.
Yeah.
The report speaks to that.
the report speaks to the iron grasses in
And
further to think there was 3 or 4 allotments council purchased 14 years ago from the then landowners. We're talking about a portion of lot 23, which is the piece that wraps around the LDFO, the old Woodard School land, the open, and off to Reynolds Road and goes around as far as an unnamed road. And what you see as number 186, I understand council owns that in freehold title as well.
Yes.
When we bought that,
Just for reassurance for councillor after it's a CT, so it's a certificate of title, so it's council land, not Crown record.
the council getting any closer to being happy with what the process is.
Well, Mayor, well, it's just moving. We move the second portion, it goes to public consultation, and then the council will work from there.
Well,
That's what the solution
I've already got a motion, so.
Oh,
That's Councillor Coleman ahead of you, and the second part two of that will, I think, do that, Councillor, that process. Commencement of public consultation. Is everyone feeling comfortable to vote? Yes. That's a lot of land. Most vote.
Thank you. I think it's good. It's cleaning up another anomaly that we've encountered. The archery club we're using allotment 23, I believe, or was promised to, I don't think they've ever used it. And also, it raised its head more recently with the netball in the last court, which pokes over as cleaning it all up.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll put the motion as agreed. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Unanimously. Number 10 is community land management plan for the old Meningie Council Chapter, which I was called the town hall still. I believe I've got the right map. Councillor Glenn, am I right? Or have I got another building in there?
The original change
Original chambers. Back in next year.
for my time. Well,
That's before you were a child. Someone move the recommendation, if they will, please. Councillor Hill. Thank you. Looking for a second.
Question.
You've got a question, Councillor Glenn?
I think that the request from the SEA to be granted 21. Get more information on that.
Yes. Well, again, I'm the only one that sees this, on my view, that's successful.
Well, it is given that my understanding of what they've been spent. Many years ago, when the CFS was built, opposite the hospital, at one point in time, that the SEA would then co-join there and share some parts of that building, and there was extensive land in that area. So that then all of the emergency services, the hospital, the ambulance, those would be in a similar space and share some facilities. Now, I'm just throwing that out there, so I find 21 accepted.
Yeah, 21 plus 21 is pretty average for community land to the kind of establishments. The smaller leases are not generally being put there. I've seen that happen here at Huron. I haven't seen it happen at other councils so much. It's generally 21 plus 21. It used to say 42 and it changed about 2016 or something to go back to 21 plus 21. So this is not out of the ordinary for local government issue 21 plus 21. Particularly with community groups, maybe looking to lease a hall or something like that, or for example, the level that then really has excellent tenure for them to be more successful with grants, because when grants are being issued, they generally want to see that there's long tenure there. So if I'm not sure about the history, all I can say is the SES requested the 21 plus 21. This is about the community land management plan, not about the lease at this stage. That will come back to council to discuss the lease.
The further question is, prior to that lease coming back to council, we ascertain from the state is what the intent is, moving to that location. I'm only asking that question because certainly there was significant discussion about having that centralised, and obviously the mayor is aware of some of that. So we went down to go with that.
15 years ago. Been around for a fair while.
How much do you have?
Stage 2 of CFS moving.
Yeah, so is it still in intent to do that? Then we'll know whether the 21
I would suggest a request for a 21 plus 21 on this land is their intent is not to relocate.
So my question is coming through a request from the state.
I'll have to check that and get back to you.
They're two different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like that.
Sure. Yep, we'll get back to you.
Councillor Taylor, I'm looking for a second still.
Question. Sorry, regarding, so the two are very, very similar. So the two in the land management plan and the Lindy one are very similar. What wasn't mentioned in the previous one was the intention to lease to the football club. Is that going to be similar arrangement to say they going moving to the 21?
That's what I've suggested at all of our community meetings.
Yeah.
That's what I recommended to them, that it be a 21 plus 21. And I reminded them that it's not my decision, it'll be the chambers, but I did say that that's generally the way that it goes, 21 plus 21.
Excellent, thank you.
Yep.
Good time presented. Let's I
Didn't realise it wasn't.
Well, try 3 times. It's still again.
Yeah, well, and as per the information here, SES and grant, as we requested a 21-year plus 21. So it's like most of these things, if they want to build a new building somewhere, they'll walk away from this and will be coming back to council.
Repeat that information. Councillor Land.
In terms of, yes, this is only community land. We're talking about building management plans and all that sort of thing. Serious point to consider. We mentioned that allotment 190 is still Crown land, not under care and control of council. That block contains the toilets for the chamber. Now, if Crown land, for some reason or other, decide to do something with that block of land, suddenly the chambers does not have a toilet facility. The CFS shed, the SES shed does have their own toilets on board. The shed in the back right-hand corner on the 190 is the SES storage shed. But the concern is the toilets, which our council has been looking at for a number of years now to upgrading to the NOx standard. But those toilets are the essential part of the old chamber in CCI.
Mr. Mayor, aren't you going to be public consultation?
Yeah, we are.
We're not even making a decision.
That's right. Nonetheless, the councillor raised an interesting point about, look, shall we put the Crown to do? Yeah, what does the Crown want to do with 190?
Part of the background, everything that talked about, it's more than just that.
Presume the Crown's paying us to look after it.
In that case, it can upgrade the toilets that needs to be if they haven't missed out in the last room.
For some reason it wasn't quite deemed, was it? Okay. Councillor, you moved, so you start.
Okay, I'll just make a comment. I used to be controller of this mini state emergency service back in the day, and I was sort of around about the time the new CFS was built. And I remember being part of the local disaster planning discussion, and there was, concerns that if you put all your emergency services in one spot and there's a disaster that affects that spot, then you no longer have your separate. So I think that one of the reasons they kept it separate at that stage is because of that. And also reluctance from the CFS to allow the SES to join in with them. But that's beside the point. I think it should move to public consultation as discussed.
Okay. Votes closed. Put the motion. All those in favour? Again, carried unanimously. Thank you. Number 7, sorry.
I'll move that one, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Arthur. Councillor Brown, please, the second draft. In favour of number 7. Votes make sense. I put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. That's it. You're
Obviously, there's no report from them. Could I Through you, Steve. We have a three in the information document, or three roads in the information document, I'll get that. But over the recent months, we have done 7 Mile Road and a Rung Road. We've just taken them 4 weeks ago, the Woodsville Road. So where are the road, the details for all those road counters?
We can, through you, Mayor, we can circulate that out, session councillor.
I think we do need to know that, because these are later than those other ones. And also, as one of the points of that, can we notify where the actual road counter is put on the road?
We can provide you with that information in advance. We know, sometimes we get an ad hoc, but generally there's a schedule of works. We can publish that, maybe that schedule of works in the info doc. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else related to that area? Right, councillors, item number 15, information document. Is there any councillor wish to bring anything out of the information document? Councillor Clive.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Page 19, 2.3 Bottomore House. Given the senior builder's officer's current workload is unable to provide an assessment of upgrade needs to work at Bottomore House. As such, the DPC is in the process of engaging an external consultant to carry out the assessment. What's how much it's going to cost for an external consultant?
I don't know the exact cost of what the external consultant is. I know that people coordinating the DCP had spoken with the building officer to see whether he had capacity, which he indicated he did. So we need to make an assessment as to whether or not there are works required for the structure to be safe to occupy. So it's the reason we'll check on the cost of that.
So it's fair to say that that may not be funded from the green fund or not? We don't know.
So you may want to enforce that the cost of the set versus the amount of works done, so it may or may not.
Councillor Roundtree.
2 questions. One, I know the canal for 4 people have been speaking to you about the quotes for the benches that going into the, has there been any resolution? I know they were a bit worried. We ended up with 4 seats and not enough bench space to pair stuff on. So has there been any progress with that?
So through Mr. Mayor, yes, there has been some discussions with regard to their requirements. We've actually obtained quotes for both options. So what we'll do is we'll actually consult with the committee prior to selecting their preferred option to make sure it satisfies their requirements.
Excellent. And the second one was around the Peak and District Sporting Club playground. Has there been any progress with that?
Yeah, I can answer that one, Mayor. I met with and his committee, sorry. Probably 2 weeks ago now. And we came to an agreement where how could we replace that playground. So they're going away to get some quotes. We're having a look at what's an option. And then we'll come back because their committee is willing to provide some donation towards that playground equipment. So we're just at that early stage of looking at what's possible, what council might need to pay for, what the community group is willing to pay for, and then we'll come to some sort of agreement.
Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
The Taylor Bank project, toilets. I know the Kevin did the digging. However, I was in discussion with the weekend with some of the people who worked on the unique animals project to the side of the railway station, and they were tasked, or some of the people in that project were tasked with creating panels for the Taylor Bank toilets. The panels, I believe, were mosaics. The panels still exist. There are 4 of them, and it was to be based, obviously, on the discussion with the previous council somewhere or other. The panels were to be based on the road, rail, river racing thing. Yeah, the panels have gone somewhere. I don't know anything about costs or who's paid for what. Panels exist, so I was just wondering if at this stage, before final design gets in here, if someone wants to talk to those people about the panels that they've part created, to see if they're decoratively useful to be transferred onto this.
That's what you made, that's the first time I've heard about panels that exist. But we would certainly see if we can incorporate them into the design if they're appropriate.
So I'll get the persons, the appropriate persons to talk to you directly.
Just to get them to, we will need to make sure that they're robust, they're within building.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if we can also find out who.
This has never been raised on the previous arts committee.
We'll follow up, Mayor, and just find out how it eventuated, where those panels are, whether they're appropriate for the current design and all those sorts of things.
Councillor Roundtree.
The insurance review, that was, very eye-opening. The insurance review, 2.3, the information document, $2.7 million worth of equipment was found to not be insured. And you rectified that, which is very good. Alarming, but good.
You weren't the only one allowed.
Yeah, but well done on spotting that and getting it rectified. I think that's very helpful.
Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With the chair to the CEO, the CEO's report, August the 23rd, follow-up meeting with Mr. Bob Sampson, National Railway Museum, Rail Opportunity Event.
Through you, Mayor. Mr. Sampson came up following the meeting we had with him down at the National Rail Museum. We wanted his opinion on the carriages that just across the road from here, in terms of either their uniqueness or their historical value. Apart from the fact that it was swooped by a magpie standing in the paddock. But his view is that none of those rail carriages are of significance, and he would recommend, if I wrote to him and asked him for advice about demolishing. You know, let's undercover for one thing. We're just waiting for them to fall down around our ears, and so at some point we will have a safety issue. And in terms of their historical importance, they are not in the frame.
Yeah, on councillor.
Yeah, can I write to reply, please, Mr. Mayor? Some of those vans are of significant value to Carlin Bend. Bob might be unaware of this, but one of them is actually a kitchen van, and it's part of the South Australian Railways accident train consist, and that there's a rich history of operating out of the branch lines and the main line, tending to derailments for 2 or 3 days and providing food, whatever, to the gang who work 24/7. So maybe we should talk about or investigate one of those vans to be kept under the shelter, being the old kitchen van, and yes, the rest of those M cars, they made hundreds of them in the Webb era in the 1930s. So I think also it might be careful that we probably put it out to the community. Some people might be a bit sensitive about this, the way I feel.
We're not doing anything yet, councillors.
This was really just starting the conversation, councillor, about.
The CEO has taken quite an interest in rail heritage. It's a revival, I can tell you.
So
It's an exploratory journey, and I suppose it ended up with checking the value of the old wagon that was in our depot sales list. Yeah, people not.
Any value.
Well, was of some value apparently.
Yes, people.
Someone actually bought it. Surprising looking at its condition, but nonetheless.
So for you, Mayor, this is certainly not something we're doing tomorrow. It really was just starting to have a look at what was there, what was its significance. If we were to, as you suggest, one of them may have some value from a local perspective. How do we preserve it then? That would require a budget. So there's a whole process to be worked through first, and community engagement around the issue is certainly part of it. But the driving for me was one, were they historically significant, and the safety issue was really concerned me since I've had a good look at them it's playing out.
Go on, councillor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Again, the CEO report. September the 8th, Parliament Town entry discussing the Parliament stakeholders and senior community tourism officer of Parliament. Through the chair to the CEO, I've been meeting regularly with Malcolm Peake. Malcolm Peake has been an activist at both ends of town getting them done up, and also I'm on the Parliament Progress Association. So, with the CEO, could you ensure from now on that I get in the loop and invited to these meetings, please?
So through you, Mayor, that, we didn't instigate that meeting, the residents did. So, and it was to, they really just wanted to, I suppose, talk about or refresh their memory about what the entrance activity had been a year or so ago.
Yep.
And to talk about, I suppose, what they saw as their vision for the town. There was no intention to exclude you, councillor,
No,
that it was instigated by that.
No, so there is some broad plans that were drawn up a few years ago. The principal with more paper or a briefing on that, probably that would be appropriate, councillors. And
There was, yes, through you, Mr Mayor, there was a town hall meeting here with the community.
I've seen some very broad and, dare I say, elaborate plans. Adventurous.
Yeah, there are two sets actually. There are two different, and I don't know the chronology of which came first, but there are two different, very different sets of entrance and exit plans for the town.
Community had a lot of input.
So it's one of the subjects that will be raised at the Federal Member of Parliament on Friday, councillors, when we have the opening of the Peak and Sherlock stuff is where we might go in terms of funding and enhancement through this town, let alone some roads. Actually some roads, but that's, and I talked to the Deputy Mayor on the way out today. Councillor Hill, you going to ask?
Yes, referring to the information document.
Yes, yes.
41 with the new signage done by the two. It is so nice to see flattening signs. The one that was down the Coorong was just basically so faded and very unattractive. I'm really pleased to see that that's been upgraded and they look fantastic.
Exactly, councillor. Is that just done out of the blue, or did they give us any heads up?
Through you, Mayor, councillor Kelly Edge has been working tirelessly with Julie Bates at the latest Coorong group. I'll just get a word there. The Murray River Lakes Coorong Tourism Development Group, and she was instrumental in pushing those. And I think there was many allocated across a few districts, and I think she mentioned that we probably got the most in our district. She worked very hard to get that done.
Thank you, councillor. Anything else about the information document?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, just, can I just have a little bit of clarification here on the Coorong District Council? It's internally funded projects. We've got a scholarship here,
Page.
page 53 to 54. We've got the red line. Green was funding application successful, funding application one, funding application unsuccessful. And we've got the lodge, there's the Tone Bend netball course, Canal Pool, and then the skate park 200,000. Then we go down further, and they are, according to this funding application, lodge, and I thought they were part of that 700,000. Right, and then we go down further, we've got these are under application lots, and we've got Menindee Skate Park again for another 100,000 for the foundation, the rural and regional review, and then we've got Lake in Warra, local communities, we've got the Murray Trail, the road up against Hill Street, and upskill Coorong community volunteers. Now I thought the Lake in Warra, Murray Coorong trails are also holiday 700, so they should be approved, not done.
So through you, Mayor, we haven't received any advice back from the government yet around that. So it was a two-step process.
All right.
First of all, we had to say that we're interested in having the 750,000, which we've done. And then we had to submit the individual projects, and that's what these are. under that program, and we haven't heard back yet.
Then there's also the Community Wellbeing and Resilience Grant, which is a mini skate park.
So, councillor, once we approved that first part of that process, there was a chance to apply for that particular grant. It was probably just a chancer, and it was definitely a chancer, because nonetheless, I understand we've now applied for a different grant from the Foundation of Rural and Regional Renewal, tackling tough times together, for $100,000. Trust me, we're more hopeful, or we are more hopeful, I believe.
We are.
That's not some information received.
So we took the opportunity with the allocation through the RCI grant, 200,000, to leverage that to see if we could get them in terms of funding for the skate park, because it meant the difference between $200,000 skate park, which is quite limited in its functionality, to a 300,000. So we applied for, as the Mayor said, that first one on there with the community wellbeing. We weren't successful, but since then we've also had a conversation with the FRR, tackling tough times together, and they're pretty certain that we'd be a contender for that, and that we will know that in February. So we have a community meeting with the skate park and the community groups tomorrow night to talk with them about that. At some point, we may only have the 200,000 to build the skate park, but we may also have a 300,000 skate park if we can leverage those grants.
So we continue to try and add to those projects where we decided not to allocate the full amount. Some projects also back in Drought 2 that we started funding.
Yeah.
That, and any opportunity to have with any politicians while we're having further discussion. I'll probably be thinking there of Tinanara Golf Club in particular. But obviously the Taylor Bend netball courts are probably the main target at this stage. This council for some time hasn't received any funding under building better regions, which is the Commonwealth funding process. And so we'll start to work around a forthcoming election date for that purpose.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions out of the information document? Anything? Mosquitoes. Give me an update on those mozzies.
Just for your information, it's not actually about the mozzies. I just wanted to say that with Miles being on board, he's determined that he can do that mosquito surveillance, and there's a saving there of about $12,000 to $15,000 by doing it in-house. So I just wanted to, sorry, page 23.
How we can do that, because
There are techniques, councillor.
There are
and then they pulled out, and I do believe that there's a lot of mosquitoes around. Yeah, as it would be before.
It's surveillance, not necessarily eradication.
Yeah. Any more questions or information document? I'm taking that there is no more questions, councillors. No, in the mic.
Actually, I do, sorry, Mr. Mayor. In relation to RV friendly, I know we've got that now listing. But you know, not all of us have RV friendly now, but we just on our land that would be RV friendly is not considered appropriate, and that was actually at the overgrown community. We need
The point is, some areas we need more RV friendly. It's part of the general review in that area.
and I think it's around our land category as we were going to look at that. It turns out our land category was may not always be correct.
Brief.
Yes, sure. So as per the Taylor Bend Community Land Management Plan, that has to allow for that kind of camping to happen. So in the notice in the Taylor Bend one, we mentioned about RV friendly there. So the Community Land Management Plan that's attached to that land will need to allow for that as well. So we'll be doing that. And then if that's the council chooses to do for that specific land.
Do you mean, councillor, were you thinking of a particular area?
And the debate prior to some of it was actually around video. However, that apparently has some issues around land category. Zoning.
The overall intelligence.
And so there was some issues around that, and the overall controlling committee did agree to do that, and did survey both the carrying up and some of the locals initially, which felt quite positive. Would be aware that our carrying up is quite specific, therefore limited on these, and hence they come through that like too much. It would be good to have some space allocated, like conveying that to the council.
I think I'm going to cut it off there. We'll finish the part of the ordinary agenda. So for those watching the live stream, please be advised the meeting is about to move into confidence and the live stream will stop. For those who wish to view the end of the meeting, the video will be uploaded to YouTube after the meeting as finalised. How are we going to go with that, Anne? The IT man for that? You got that? Perhaps.
We talk about that in years.
So councillors, while we get Sean in to stop that, I'm well aware we're still live streaming technically. So is that a problem? No. So CEO, we want to talk about proposed street park.
So I've just, Rob's up today, but in terms of the COVID safe plan, I'll start with that. So I know that the state government came back with a couple of questions last week. They weren't particularly complex questions, but I'll just read out what he said. The plan passed the first stage review, now been sent on to stage 2, detailed review, which means the infection control officer is now looking at it. The event is category C, so it won't need to go to the board, just to the director once stage 2 is done, and there are no issues. We should have confirmation by week's end all going well. So that's the COVID street party. In terms of activity that we are looking at, from a food, food fair, Town Bend, Rotary, Lions, Primary School, Kindy, the SA Tornado Potato, and the Little Local. Then we also have markets, and we are aiming for about 30 exhibitors. So far we've received confirmation from 14, and even if we only got near the 20, I think that's probably reasonable. We're hoping it ramps up over the next couple of days. The following displays will be part of the exhibition. The Town Bend Car Club with approximately 25 to 30 classic cars. The SA Drifting Car Club with approximately 5 drifting vehicles. I don't know what a drifting vehicle is, but I'm sure you all do. The Lower Vintage Engine and Machinery Club will be exhibiting a range of old vintage engines, cars and stationary motors. SA Motorcycles, the Town Bend will have a merchandise stall and motorbikes on display. The SA Lawnmowers Racing Club will have an exhibition on racing rides on lawnmowers, and the SA Large Scale Remote Control Club will also have a display. So they're the things that we have at the moment. So there's a fair bit of activity happening there. Is it the same as having the racing car drivers there? The answer is no. Is it, I think, mentioned at the community meeting that we had last week, is it a good way of, I suppose, taking leadership in the community and saying that things are possible in this post-COVID world? We need to put the COVID focus over it, but I think many of the smaller groups are having a look to see how we manage it so that we can then provide advice and assistance when they want to do their functions, whether it's over Christmas, New Year, or what have you.
Quick question. Last year there was such, in the chamber, there was such a resistance to doing this, which is why it was outsourced. What's changed?
So,
well,
I'm sure I can't.
Well, the announcement of the two races. Sean, we're still live on.
Yes,
Yes,
We turn it.